like this intro. Every time I hear it, I'm like, yeah, that's a cool jam. Hey guys, welcome back. Defining Truth, episode 12. It's been a minute, but we've all been very busy with the decline of Western civilization. Hey, we have a special guest this morning, California State Assemblyman Bill Essayli. And Bill, in a minute, I'm going to have you give us a little background on yourself. But first, I want to remind you guys that if you don't already, please subscribe to the podcast. It goes out on all podcast formats, and you can watch it on YouTube and video platforms. And we always need your support, so give us a follow. And please share the episodes. That's a great way to spread truth. Brandon, we have a little bio on Bill here that you can read us in. Short one.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. What happened to my short little one?
This is right from your campaign site.
Yeah, here we go. So Bill Essayli previously served as an assistant United States attorney as well as a Riverside County deputy district attorney. And as a prosecutor, Bill worked on cases that included the 2015 San Bernardino terror attack, drug trafficking, identity theft, and white-collar fraud. Today, along with being an assembly member in the California State Assembly, Bill is a partner in the successful Essayli and Brown LLP law firm, and the proud son of Lebanese American immigrants, and has lived in Riverside County for the better part of 3 decades.
Awesome. So, Bill, before we get into anything, can you tell us a little bit about, not the paste and copy version there, but how you came to be where you're at? I mean, it doesn't have to be super long, just for those who may not know you or.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. So I grew up in Corona. So if you guys know anything about Inland Empire, Corona, Circle City there. Had a pretty basic middle-class life and always aspired to be in law enforcement, ultimately ended up being a prosecutor. And I really thought that's what I would do for the rest of my life. I loved being a prosecutor. But what I noticed to happen over the decade that I was a prosecutor was just the systematic erosion of accountability and the erosion of public safety issues and laws. And it made it very difficult for us as prosecutors to hold people accountable and responsible for crimes. And really the people getting the short end of the stick were the victims. And so when I was taking a look at this, I'm like, where's all this coming from? And it's through the legislature. They were passing bill after bill to basically chip away at public safety issues. And then I looked at the actual legislators and thought, what a colossal joke of a group of people we have representing us. And then I basically had the opportunity to run for state assembly in 2018. And I did. I stepped down as a federal prosecutor to ran in 2018, very competitive race. We did not win that year. It was a bad cycle, ballot harvesting. There's a lot of things working against us. And then I went off, opened up my own firm, honestly thought I'd never run for office again. And then in 2022, the redistricting kicked in, the new districts, and my hometown became a more conservative red district, and made the decision to run. And then we got elected and won last November. So that's kind of my story and how I got here in the abbreviated format. And
I'm assuming that's been just all daisies and roses and fun since you made it up there?
Not quite. So you have to remember, we're not just the minority in California, we're the super minority.
Yeah.
So we are 18 out of 80. We literally, I don't want to say literally, but we are irrelevant when it comes to making public policy. We do not get to set the agenda. We do not get to set the conversations. We do not get to have really a meaningful say on what goes into legislation, because they have the votes to pass whatever they want, how they want, when they want.
Yeah, so that's rough. And what is it? Let me back up a little bit here. What is it that, given your background and all of the culture war tension going on in our country today, what is it that made you lean towards being a conservative and running as a Republican? Was it the way you were raised, or was it your personal beliefs? Tell me a little bit about that.
That's a really good question. I have to tell you, like growing up, I was so, and mind you, my parents were not born here. They're not from here. They came here by choice. And they came here because America is the best country in the world, and everyone outside of America knows that. And so I was born here, went through public school, and I was always fascinated by the founding of our country, our founding fathers, the documents. I've been to the National Archives. I've looked at the Declaration of Independence. I've looked at the Republic. And you really look at how this government was set up, how genius it was. I've always been fascinated and mesmerized by our country's founding and the principles that guide us. And so when I look at the parties, to me, one party is for maintaining and basically abiding by those founding documents. And the other, and I guess you call that conserving our nation and conserving the founding of our nation. And the other party just keeps chipping away and eroding it and doesn't like it and hates it. And there's this undercurrent that they hate America. And, you know, as I got older, I didn't really have a way to define it, but now I know it. It's Marxism, it's socialism, there is a political ideology that underpins the left, the Democratic Party, and they need to undo what our founding fathers set up so they can put in the system they want, which is socialism.
Yeah, I found that. Now, I found a very similar experience. You mentioned you prosecuted federal cases in the Central District, right?
Yes.
I had, more than a few cases that I worked there as a special agent with the Diplomatic Security Service as well. And I found that both my background in federal law enforcement as well as local, because as you know, I was a police officer and a deputy here in California as well. Mm-hmm. I felt like, I know that my experience with real life, real world issues also contributed to my perspective as a conservative. Now, you know, I grew up in a strong Christian home. My dad was a pastor. My parents were missionaries outside of the U.S., where I grew up mostly. So I grew up with a deep appreciation for what America was and those deep Christian ideals instilled in not only my psyche, but in my deeply held beliefs. But I think that being exposed to real world events just further solidified that, because, and we make an argument for this here at Defining Truth all the time, we believe that conservatism is really rooted in reality, right? There's a lot of deception and sleight of hand that has to occur with leftism. Mainly, history is not on their side, right? I mean, you have to really work pretty hard to convince an entirely new generation that, you know, all of the evil and atrocities committed by secular humanist governments like the Nazis and the Marxists and the Soviets and, you know, the Maoists, and the list goes on, that all of that just, you know, never really happened. And, you know, it's really America that's bad. And I feel like specifically in government, and I don't know, you know, if you can chime in, but like I saw a big disconnect between liberal leftist policies as it relates to crime and law enforcement, just being so out of touch with reality, right? It causes even the detractor to say, hold on a second, guys, like I feel like you're missing something here. You know, your policies contribute more to the detriment of America than positive. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, basically the progressives, the liberals, they sell an idea. They're selling a story. It's very imaginary. And that's why they do so young with young people. Young people don't really have a good grasp on history. They don't really study it or learn it, I think, like we used to in school. And so they come to these kids and they say, look at this utopia. Look at this utopia we have to offer. You know, why can't everyone be equal? Why can't everyone get the same pay? Why can't everyone live in a big house? Well, there's something called scarcity. That's not how the world works. But they sell an imagination, an imaginary world, and then they peddle in virtue signaling. Almost everything that happens in Sacramento, every bill, every speech, is just a form of virtue signaling to signal or to say, look how much better of a person I am than this other person. Look how much moral I am, even though what they're doing is immoral. But it's all about selling an image. So when we talk about like things like Prop 47, which basically decriminalized drug use in the state of California and contributed directly to the rise in homelessness, they'll never admit that. They'll never acknowledge that. And instead they say, oh, you people want to criminalize drug use. You want to put people in jail who have a addiction, who have a medical issue. Jail is not the answer. We are nicer. We are better people. We're going to treat them like humans. We're not going to criminalize them. We're going to offer them resources and help, even though that's not how human nature works. I mean, people who are addicted to drugs are not going to make rational decisions and get help on their own most of the time. But they ignore that. Instead, it's just a virtue signaling and a doubling down. And then when their policies fail, there's really no accountability because their intentions were good. The public has a very short memory and just moves on. It's almost fascinating to watch.
Well, and the irony is that all of their so-called loving policies only further contribute to the destruction of our society. I mean, look at California, right, where crime is rampant, fentanyl overdoses are rampant, violence, behaviors, just generally, like in a social sense, is out of control amongst a younger generation in schools and as they become increasingly aggressive. So it turns out that, the definition of loving someone, according to the secular humanist, or as Christians, we say the world, versus what Western civilization or the Christian Judaic perspective on loving, completely two different things, right? So in a nutshell, right, as a Christian, loving someone is rooted in truth. You can't really love someone unless you're being honest with them. Mm-hmm. And the left has a completely different perspective, one of total acquiescence. It's like, well, if you love me, you don't ever oppose anything I say. You have to agree and drive forward anything I want to do, regardless of whether it's harmful to me and the world around me. Because if you dare to tell me no, you're a bigot and I don't like you.
It's like a parent. It's like a parent who just gives their kid whatever they want. And I think that's loving them. And that's not love. I mean, that's very destructive. Parents sometimes have to say no, or have to say, this is what's best for you. But you can't just give your kid candy for dinner every night. That's going to ruin them.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. We have an example in the book we just finished, Defining Truth. There's a whole chapter titled Love. And I wrote this example of, as a parent, I have 3 kids. If your kid said, or if your kid wanted to put his hand on the hot stove in the kitchen and he really wanted to, would it be loving to stop him or to let him do whatever he wanted? Right. And as a child, sometimes you don't understand that because you don't understand the consequences of life, or perhaps you're short-sighted, or whatever it is. Other people have a better perspective. But as a parent, you're thinking, this may hurt you for the time being because I'm stopping you from doing something you want to do. But the truth is, I'm saving you the pain of burning your hand off, So it seems childish, but it's a great example when applied to social issues today, because again, the left, the progressive Marxists, have to do a really, really good job at convincing America and many other countries where they've tried this over and over and over again. They have to reinvent themselves, and they have to convince everybody that touching the hot stove is actually really good. And if you try to stop me from touching the hot stove, you must be a racist. And people buy into that because they've never touched a hot stove before. So it's really sad that oftentimes it takes touching the hot stove and burning yourself to realize that they've made a mistake. And I think that many nations have learned this the hard way, right? I mean, secular humanism in general in governments over the past century have led to more human death toll than any other form of government to have ever existed, right? And we often recall that more people died in the 20th century alone than in the previous 19 centuries combined. That's for those who would say, oh, well, religion causes wars and this and that, pales in comparison to what secular humanists, and by, just to clarify, what I mean by secular humanist is, I mean countries that have decided we reject the idea of a creator, we don't believe in God, and so we've made government God. Everywhere that's done that has led to massive human suffering. You think, even in modern times, you think North Korea, where, they worship Kim Jong-un and he is as a deity to them. And you see mass starvation and torture. And you see this all throughout history. The numbers are there, plain as day, right? And yet we see this now in our own country. So I want to mention something that we talked about beforehand. So some local stuff here that is sort of like the front lines of this war. Local school district in Chino, I believe, right, has introduced a parent notification policy despite major state opposition. Tell me a little bit about what that is, because I know you're more familiar with it than me, and why that's important in relation to what we're talking about.
Yeah. So when I was running last year on the campaign trail, I was made aware of several cases throughout the state of California where parents were finding out after the fact that their kids were being transitioned at school, having their gender transition, meaning new names, new pronouns, new locker rooms, new bathrooms.
Without their parents' knowledge.
Without their parents knowing. There were several lawsuits filed. In fact, one poor mother, her daughter committed suicide. And she found out after her daughter died that her daughter was going through this and the school was involved and she had no idea. And so she blamed the school for not telling her, because we know kids who struggle with gender dysphoria, is a medical term, experience mental health issues at dramatically higher rates, talking suicide, depression, anxiety. So to exclude the parent from taking care of their kids seems just like child abuse to me. So there was that happen. And then sort of what put things over the edge, there was a teacher in my area here, Jessica Tapia, who the school informed her that their official policy is, hey, if a student wants to transition, you are not going to tell their parents. And she, in her good conscience, could not do that. She said, you're asking me to lie to parents. I can't do that. And they fired her. All this, we hear about how hard it is to fire teachers. They can sexually assault kids. They can be charged. And there's nothing we can do. You can't touch a bad teacher. But one great teacher who said, I can't lie to parents, no questions asked, she had to be terminated and dismissed right away. I mean, that's shocking.
Unbelievable.
So she's suing the school district. So those things combined made me think, what is going on here? So knowing that I'm not going to pass law, but I can at least introduce bills, I introduced a bill. It's called AB 1314, and it didn't prohibit anything. It didn't say a kid can't transition. All it said is that, hey, if the school is going to be involved in transitioning a kid, you must notify the parents. And this is when all hell broke loose. This was endangering kids, and we're going to put their lives in jeopardy, and we're outing kids, and all this crazy over-the-top rhetoric. But really what it boiled down to is the official position of the government and the Department of Education in the state of California is that parents do not have a right to know what's happening with their kids. This is revolutionary and really, really destructive. We can talk about it. But long story short, they wouldn't even allow my bill to have a hearing because they said it would create a forum for hate speech.
Right.
So my bill was summarily just not heard. And so we went to basically Plan B, or Phase 2, if you will, because we don't have the votes in Sacramento. But guess what? There's a lot of school districts where we have parents on the school boards. Right. And we have majorities. So we're moving to the school districts now. So Chino's the first district, and we expect other districts to follow suit, where they're going to implement an affirmative parental notification policy, not just when you want to transition their kid, but also if the kid's having other issues with low performance, or they get in a fight, or they get injured or something. We're going to have an affirmative policy that says you must notify parents.
What's most amazing about that to me is that conservatives, by and large, for many, many years have been on the defense, right? And one of the primary methods that we fall back to our bulwarks, our defenses, is we hide behind existing laws and legislation. And what it seems that there's, in an accelerated way in recent years, the progressive Marxists have figured out, like, hey, let's just change the law. Let's use the power of legislation to win moral arguments, right? So on one hand, they're telling especially Christians and churches, we don't want you to legislate morality. Stay out of our politics, right? When all the while they are legislating morality. It's their belief. They're using the power of legislation to force it on everyone else. That's literally, see, morality is legislated. Whoever tells you that it's not, it's not true, right? Every law we have is based in some moral premise or ethic. And the question is, what predominant group determines what morality prevails, right? So right now, the progressive Marxists are saying our reality will prevail because it flows alongside support for a progressive Marxist agenda. And if you dare to stand up against it, it's like, hey, let the kid touch the hot stove, right? Along those lines, I noticed that Pacific Justice Institute is working on this as well. They refer to the due process requirements with the education code. I believe it's 221.5. I'm reading it here, which speaks against the notion that a public school district can, much less is required, to conceal from parents or child's attempts at gender transition. That's according to Kevin Snyder. He's the chief counsel at PJI. But the California Department of Education's protestations aside, he wrote, and I quote, "One looks in vain for a provision in section 221.5 that authorizes school employees to engage in conduct calculated to deceive a parent." That's according to the legal memo. And of course, you mentioned Jessica Tapia, right? And that was the same issue. They wanted her to, in a calculated way, lie to parents. So here's where our perspective at Defining Truth, we go a little bit deeper than the politic, right? Here's where it begs the question: why do they want people to do this, right? And I often say I highly doubt that Hillary Clinton cares about the transgender 9-year-old who's having her breast removed in Southern California, no. Right? So there is a political purpose behind the proverbial culture war issues. You and I have talked offline about this a lot. I have very strong opinions on the culture war. I don't shy away from criticizing the establishment approach to dealing with culture war. I think it's often dismissed when, in fact, I believe it is none other than the primary method by which the progressive Marxists are winning the war in America. And this is a great example, and I'd like to hear your opinion on it, but like, what deeper political reason is behind the militant, and let's just pick one, the trans agenda in California?
Yeah. Well, I think everything they do is calculated to gain more power, right? It's about growing power. So, look, the left have pretty much, they brainwashed all the adults they're going to brainwash, I think. I think everyone's kind of locked in their respective political silos. You have the conservatives on one side, and you have the leftists on the other, and they're not budging. Nobody's budging. Nobody's moving. I think what they're making a play for here is the next generation. And they know the biggest impediment to getting the minds of the next generation is their parents, right? The parents are the biggest influence on their kids, shaping their values, their morals, their world perspective. It's the parents who shape their kids. And what they're trying to do, I believe, is pierce that parent-child relationship that's sacred, and I think constitutionally protected, by the way. They want to get in there. They want to create a wedge between parents and students, and then they want the government, the state, to be the new parent, the new role model, to guide their views, guide their values. And let's be honest, they're not interested in education. They're interested in indoctrination. And that's what I think is driving this. And this is the wedge issue. It's telling kids, hey, you can pick your gender. If you feel not comfortable in your body, which kid feels comfortable in their body? Very few. Hey, you're not comfortable in your body, or you're having this issue. Maybe you're in the wrong body. Maybe you're a girl or you're a boy. And so this is going to fix going back to selling this imaginary land. It's like, well, if you change your gender, it's going to fix all your issues. And now it becomes this like social contagion. And then, oh, your parents aren't going to accept it. So we're going to help you. We're going to be your new parent. We're going to be your new family. And it's this whole thing. And I really think that's what's driving it.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly dangerous for the future of our republic. And it's especially dangerous for parents who dissent, who disagree with the far left's progressive agenda, because we're quickly being demonized. In fact, we are, right, both nationally and at the local level. Even, for California being the 5th largest economy in the world, a very busy place, lots of problems, lots of debt, lots of drugs, lots of everything else. And way, way, way down at the bottom of that, you have Governor Newsom recently commenting on a local school board decision to remove a staff member, and prior to that, removing CRT from the curriculum. And here you have the governor essentially threatening them on Twitter, saying, you've got my attention, and whatever else he said. It just goes to show you that while many conservatives on the establishment side seem to dismiss the culture war issues, that's very one-sided, because on the left you have the governor of one of the biggest economies in the world, specifically commenting on a culture war issue. If I was in leadership, I might take a step back and say, hey, maybe this is important. The left sure seems to care about it, right?
Josiah, don't forget the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, classified parents as domestic terrorists.
Oh man!
He unleashed the FBI's terrorist. The tags they use basically for terrorism. He authorized that to be used against parents in school board meetings. Why? Look at Virginia. Virginia was a swing state,
right,
and it switched from a liberal governor to a conservative governor. Why? Over this issue of our schools and parenting and parental rights and what's happening in the education system. I think they see that as a massive threat, and that's why they're going so crazy on this issue. To me, though, when they're going crazy, that's a signal that we're over the target.
Right.
So I know we've talked about this before. I will tell you, there are people in our party who shy away from controversy, shy away from these social issues. I feel the opposite. I think that's when they behave that way, when they behave crazy, that's when you double down, because you're over the target.
Well, it's also a great indication of how powerful the local activists can be, right? I mean, what you're seeing here with Chino is that you took AB 1314? Did I mess that up? What was your bill?
That's correct.
You took AB 1314. As an elected state assemblyman, and they just slammed you down, not even willing to hear it. And yet here you have a locally elected, family, a mom and dads that are out here saying, hey, if the state level won't do it, we're going to take back our city one at a time. And it's really a testament to how effective that is. I think you're right. I think probably at some point someone's whispering in Newsom's ear, hey, remember what happened in Virginia? But to me, and here's a little call to action to anyone that may be listening. This is why it is imperative. It is beyond imperative in knowing the times that we live in here in these precursor to conflict years. If you're a history buff, it is imperative that you engage in local politics. You have to care. There's a prevailing attitude that is infectious, and I've seen it spread amongst conservatives and pundits on social media and online, which I vehemently disagree with. And that's that you should just live and let live. We should just, take our families and go move out to Idaho and disappear. That perspective is nothing less than cowardice. It does not work. Whatever happens here will eventually reach you. It's going to come to you. It's not the American way. The American way is not to shelter in place and forget everyone else. We are not isolationalists. The U.S. has tried that over and over again. It leads to mass death and suffering. So if it happens on a grander scale geopolitically, it is equally as true locally. You have to care. We don't just do things as Americans for ourselves. We do it because we care about our community, our families, the future of our children, and other people's children's. That's what public service is.
The best defense is offense. I really believe that.
Yeah.
And I have to say, this is a subject that makes me sad, because I think it's our side that's failing on this. I talk to a lot of people on our side, and when I say our side, I mean conservative people, right-leaning Californians. They're not interested in fighting anymore. They want to cut bait and run. Almost all of them I talk to, they have plans. We're going to Florida. We're going to Texas. We're going to, you name it. They're ready to cut bait and run. And I say, well, what's going to happen in California? Because I agree with you. What happens here will just start spreading to other states. And so I really hope people take a different approach. The answer is not to cut bait and run. It's to stay and hold your ground and fight, because it's worth fighting for. And what kind of life do you want to lead, and what kind of society do you want to leave for the next generation? We have become a society where people are they want to be left alone. They don't want any controversy. They want to watch their Netflix and their Instagram and get their Uber Eats and just live this like jolly, happy life. I'm like, what kind of life is this? So, but that's where we're at. And I think they're being socially conditioned to basically be complacent and be left alone. That's the big problem.
I just read this morning, just to back up what you're saying, I'm having trouble finding it because I can't log into the account, but Brandon, you have Instagram up maybe on your phone. Are you using your phone?
Yeah, I can pull it up, but I think I know where you're going with this. The stat about the 2/3 of Californians saying that they want to leave.
Yeah, was that who put that out?
Yeah.
Let me pull it up, but yeah, it was. I think it was 2/3 or 3/4. I think it was 2/3 of Californians have considered leaving the state.
Seriously.
Yeah,
that was put out by California Family Council.
California Family Council. If you follow us on Instagram, Defining Truth on Instagram, on my story this morning, we posted those stats. Outrageously high number.
And it says 2/3 of California residents are considering moving. So that's like actively considering moving, not half considered and decided not to, considering at this moment.
And the issues they listed, because that poll goes through several issues, are all issues that that the left is directly responsible for. They're all political issues. Has to do with the economy and crime and lack of affordability and housing and taxes, right? We're taxed higher than any other state in the union here in California. Now, yesterday we were listening to, we were at a fundraiser. We listened to Congressman Jay Obernolte talking about some of the issues that California has, and the now gas tax is going up yet again. It's unbelievable. But, it's not that unbelievable if you understand progressive Marxism. Because all they're doing, they're not inventing anything new. They do the same thing everywhere they go throughout history. In every country, it's seize more. The more dependent people are on the government. Yeah, absolutely.
It's incremental, and it's almost the frog being boiled, right? You don't know you're being boiled till it's too late.
Absolutely.
And that's what they do in Sacramento. Even getting back to these parental rights thing, they chip away with small bill here, small bill there. So just to give you a couple examples. They've already legalized in the state of California, 12-year-olds can make independent medical decisions without their parents' knowledge or consent. So if you take your 12-year-old to the doctor, they will kick you out of the medical exam room unless the child gives permission. This is state law. That needs to be challenged because I don't think that's constitutional.
That's
step one. Step two, now what they're doing is expanding it. So they're saying, so there's a bill this year, it's going to pass, that says children can now get 12-year-olds and older. And I don't know how they figured out this number 12, but that's the number they've settled on now. 12-year-olds and older can seek mental health treatment or counseling without their parents' consent. And in that legislation, it says that if the counselor, who you don't get to pick and you don't even know who they are, if that counselor determines that the 12-year-old is mature enough, the counselor can place them in a outpatient residential facility, meaning remove them from the home. No allegation of child abuse, no due process, no court process. They're going to let children make these decisions. So again, they don't do it in one bill. They do one bill here and one bill there, and then you put them together and you could see the bigger agenda. And you know what really brought this to light? I was talking to a Democrat. She had a bill to basically outlaw marriage for minors, because you could still get married, I think, if you're 16 with parental consent or something. So she wanted to do a bill that says you can't get married before you're 18. The ACLUs told her no. They told her no because it goes against their agenda of where they're empowering minors to make all these adult decisions.
Yeah.
So even though they probably support minors not getting married, but because it goes against the bigger narrative and agenda that they have, they don't want to remove any consent for minors. So even the Democrat was like, and accepted it. She pulled it. So
this is infuriating.
No, that's what's happening.
It's hard to hear, honestly. It's hard to hear. Now, what you're referring to, often on social media and whatnot, it's referred to as the parental kidnapping bill. I know Real Impact has covered it quite a bit, and a bunch of other policy groups and pundits and commentators. But to be clear, that's a very real thing. These are not conspiracy theories. They're not, harbingers of things to come. This is happening now. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but this is why you have to be involved in civics and in elections, and more than just elections. You have to be involved in what's going on in your country, because we live in a republic, and in a republic, we choose the people that make decisions for us. So this whole idea of, I don't care, I'm going to go just take care of myself, you are contributing to the decline of your own society. It's outrageous. So look, you and I don't agree on everything. We'd be amiss to not bring up ACA 5. This is, a lot of people that listened to me had an issue with the way that people voted on this bill. And I talked with you about it. I understand your position, but I can't go through this without bringing it up. So for those who don't know, it had to do with changing the definition of marriage in the California Constitution. Am I right? That's in essence what it was?
Basically, yeah. In 2008, the voters approved Prop 8, which inserted the definition of marriage into the state constitution. Mm-hmm. This ACA 5 basically puts it back on the ballot to remove the definition. So it's effectively to undo Prop 8 is the intent of the ACA. That's what the author is trying to do.
And what is, can you clarify for me, what was their issue? What was their problem? That it said marriage was between a man and a woman? Was that's what they wanted to get rid of?
It was never defined in the Constitution. The definition was added to the Constitution to say marriage is defined as between a man and a woman. And let's be clear, there's no need for this ACA. So let's just start there. The Supreme Court, as you all are aware, many years ago now, decided that the federal Constitution allows anybody to get married regardless of their gender. They took the issue away from the states and just made it a constitutional issue by the Supreme Court usurping that authority. I don't agree with that process, but that's what the Supreme Court did, including several conservatives on the court. So that issue's been resolved. But the Democrats are not satisfied. They do not want to run for the reasons we've discussed about. They don't want to run on their record. They don't want to run on crime. They don't want to run on parental rights. They don't want to run on homelessness because they can't defend that. So what they do is they want to emotionally shake the public and get them on their side. The last election, if you remember, was all about abortion, even though abortion was not at risk or in jeopardy in the state of California. But they made somehow the whole election about abortion, whether it was school board or city council or governor or president, abortion was the issue. This next election, what it appears to be happening, the Democrats are going to make the next election all about gay rights, gay marriage, LGBT issues. And that's the reason they want to put this on the ballot, because they want to have a social issue to drive their base to show up and vote, because they know when their base shows up, they win. That's what I believe is the motivation behind ACA 5.
So I hear what you're saying. There's a strategy there, and I understand that. And because I've talked to you offline about this, your vote in the affirmative was a response to their strategy. Help me understand, just for the sake of people listening who would want to say, like, well, why did you vote in favor of that? And then I'm going to tell you why, I wouldn't, because let me be clear. We don't have to agree on everything, right? And that's the beauty of a republic. I understand, as a Christian involved in politics, our job is not to turn the Republican Party into the church. That's not how it works. We can work alongside a broad variety of people, right? Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, atheists, agnostics. It doesn't matter what it is. But for me, and you know this, for me personally as a Christian, I have lines that I don't compromise, because I believe that there's a deeper level than the political strategy, which is just right and wrong. And that's a moral guideline, a litmus, a plumb line, I should say, that is my guide that frankly just doesn't change. So help people understand, though, a little bit why
Sure.
You voted that way, and just the thought process behind it. Because I know a lot of people are upset about this, as you know.
No, I understand, and it was not an easy vote. It's a very tough vote. Let's be clear. The only reason they're doing it is to force Republicans to vote on it. That was the sole reason for doing this. They did it on the federal level with the I think it was called the Marriage Equality Act, and then they did it here in California. Mm-hmm. The question really before us is, is this an issue that we are going to relitigate, knowing we don't have the power to litigate it? The Supreme Court's taken that power away from us. It is the law of the land. And the question of putting it on the ballot is sort of a referendum. Let the voters decide. I understand people feel very, very strongly about the definition of marriage. And there is a question there about what is the role for the government in the marriage institution and defining that, and what's the role for the churches, the mosques, the synagogues, all that. It's a very, very, I understand, sensitive and complicated issue. But when I weighed it, I look, here's what they're trying to do. They are trying to distract this parental rights message and narrative that we have, which I think is an 80-20 issue, maybe a 90-10 issue. They want to label us and our movement as being anti-gay, anti-trans, all this, which is not accurate or true. We're talking about children. We're talking about minors. We're not talking about consenting adults that can do whatever they want. Regardless of my faith, if you're 18, do whatever you want. You're an adult. You'll be accountable to whoever, whenever. We're talking about kids. And I think what they're trying to do is conflate the issues and make it about both. On this issue, I was not interested in relitigating because it's been decided, and the public has moved on. Over 70% of the national public, it's probably higher in California, now supports it. And so rather than imposing my personal views or a faith-based view, I think it's fair to submit it back to the voters and let the voters decide the issue. I think voting against it would have been a political and strategic mistake because it will be weaponized. The whole election next year will be about Republicans wanting to roll back your social liberties, your social rights. They want to take away. And by the way, they didn't just lump gay marriage into this. They lumped interracial marriage because they claim Republicans also want to get rid of interracial marriage. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a very political hot potato, and all they're going to do is campaign on this issue and show your voting record, and it's going to distract and silence our ability to talk about the issues that can win and can matter. So I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer to people, but that is,
what would you say? What would you say to the the voter or the average conservative who would say, why does it seem that the GOP is often more willing to insult their own voters in sort of in favor of the left? And because I'm very strong opinionated on this. I don't think that strategy works. I know that's something that consultants push constantly, where there's this deep fear of the left. But I mean, even yourself a couple weeks ago, right? Like, you're a white supremacist, according to the Democrats. So, like, how many kudo points are we really winning when we sort of slap our own people in the face to appease a progressive agenda?
So I don't ever try to appease the left. That's not my goal. My goal is to convince the public and the voters and hopefully win elections. Mm-hmm. So that's who I'm concerned about. I will tell you, the majority of voters in California, over 70%, independents, that includes independents, Democrats, and Republicans, support allowing people to get married regardless of their gender. That's just the reality of it. I don't think it's a winning political issue for us to relitigate it. The Supreme Court has decided it. It is the law of the land. It's an unnecessary and irrelevant political exercise. And I think it's intended to be weaponizing and to hurt our ability to win elections. I do fundamentally believe this would hurt our ability to win elections. Do you think that the ability with independence?
Do you think that the California GOP will seek to change their platform stance that marriage is between a man and a woman?
I don't know. I know that's been that's been a hotly debated topic on both the national and the state platform. I don't know. I don't have any inside track or knowledge on that.
All right. Well, so for my listeners, then we'll move on. To be clear, the Christian perspective on this, as I mentioned, we have politics, and then there's a deeper truth that we believe remains unchanging. For the believer, from a biblical perspective, especially when it comes to politics, there's two things that really define us. It's life and marriage. They're sacred to us, right? Marriage is an institution created by God to exemplify his relationship to human beings. That's the faith perspective. So again, just like I mentioned earlier, how I believe that the left has hijacked all these culture war issues and they've sought to politicize moral issues. To me, I would step back and say, well, if gay marriage was already legal, right? So what's the deeper agenda here? Why are they seeking to push that so much? See, because I believe it's obtuse to not see the connection between the core family, meaning a husband and a wife, a mother and a father, and what they contribute to their children. It's inexorable from the strength of Western civilization. So I would say let's just forget the biblical perspective for a minute. Like, morally speaking, I as a Christian, I believe that that's morally wrong. I don't hate people who don't agree with me, but that's what the left would want you to believe, right? It's like,
do you think the government should be in the marriage business?
Well, I think that marriage, as defined between a man and a woman, is not something that should be shook. It's not really a business as much as just a statement of reality. And because it contributes...
I say that because in the Abrahamic faiths, that is the definition. There's a lot of other faiths, right? That I don't know if they define it or they don't define it.
Right.
But, I think there's a question there on, should government be the one determining the definition of marriage?
Well, what is the left doing right now? Are they not in government? See, that ball goes both ways. And that's my point too, when they say, well, we don't want you to legislate morality. We want to legislate morality. You know what I mean? It's like one of those sides gets to legislate morality. It's still the government being involved in marriage. So that's why, just to finish this thought, forget the Christian Judaic, the faith perspective for a minute and just think of it politically, as in, what are the progressive Marxists attempting to do in this country? Why is it so important for them to go after children, to destroy the relationship with parents, and to go after marriage? It's not, they do not care about the very small percentage of people that identify in, the ABC's conglomerate. It's not really, they use activists to achieve their political goals. They do that across the spectrum with everyone. They do that with people's skin color. They do it with identity groups. It's like any which way they can divide you accomplishes a progressive goal. That, Bill, that's my issue with it, politically speaking. So I have two parts. As a Christian, I'm not going to change that. Politically, do I think we're going to reverse it? Probably not. It's not going to happen in the U.S. As you said, the Supreme Court already made this decision. But we can at least acknowledge that what the left is doing is intentional with a political purpose that ends up helping them win the war. So that's why I think that this is one of many culture war issues in general that we often dismiss as, it's I don't want to interject my faith or whatever. But for the left, their faith is government. And I believe everything they do accomplishes, like you said, right? It's about seizing power. And then again, how does the issue of marriage help them seize power?
They want to. This is what they want. Talking about redefining truth. This is what they want to run on. They don't want to run on the truth or reality. They want to run on look. And they're very good at this because, and I heard a Democrat say this I was on a panel with a Democrat, and we're speaking to a business group, and she says, "You guys, all of you up here are talking about logic. You're engaged in logic. What you don't understand is logic doesn't work. Emotions work, and the left is very good at capturing people's emotions and using emotions to override logic and to get people on their side. So when they go to young people and they say Republican Party wants to take away your rights as a woman. They want to take away your rights to marry. They want to take away your right to interracial. This is what they run on. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe that. And that's what we're struggling with on how do we define ourselves and not let them define us.
I mean, and I hear what you're saying.
They set up vote. They set up vote after vote to basically define us.
Well, what they're doing is they're legislating their morality. right? They're forcing their belief on everyone else. The issue we have on the conservative side is conservatives have forgotten why they're conservatives. They don't really believe in anything anymore. And the left, as they're homogenous, they're united in their religion of progressive Marxism. We're over here trying to say, oh, well, we believe in God, but we can't talk about it. And, we're all over the place. And because of that, it's very, very difficult with the disunity to win the political war raging in this country. Mm-hmm. And that's the truth. The one thing that defines the United States of America was we were so different than every other country to have ever existed because the founding fathers took the Christian Judaic principles found in the Bible and said, let's build a country off it. No other country had ever done that. It leads to life, love, liberty, etc.
I think John Adams said that the country, what the government they set up only works if you have a moral and religious people. It
Absolutely.
does not work otherwise. I also think the most powerful position in government, see, this is a difficulty that I have now being elected to office. I have a different perspective. Everyone comes to me and wants me to fix it. I'm one person. I'm one assembly member. The most important office in the United States, the state of California, is the office of the citizen, the private citizen. You as a citizen, as a collective, have so much power you don't even know it. I mean, whether it's at the local level, school board level, city council level, at the initiative level, at the referendum level, there's all these checks in the system. You can put in Public Information Act requests. You can question your government. There's so many things you can do as a citizen. And people have forgotten, I think by design, they're made to feel like they're powerless and they don't really have the power that they have. But I just need people to remember, elected officials reflect the people that vote them into office. At the end of the day, you as a citizen have a lot of power and you have to exercise that power. I know, at Pastor Jack's church and a lot of other places, you guys always talk about how many Christians don't vote. They're not even at the table. The left votes. They get people out. They ballot harvest. The union's out there working overtime because they know at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the person who casts the ballot.
Yeah.
And they don't care how that's done or what that's done. So until we adopt the same attitude and start flexing and exercising our power, they will continue to dominate the levers of government.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very hard to change it by yourself from the inside. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to be honest. It's very difficult.
Yeah, and I imagine that you're under a tremendous amount of pressure, both from obviously constituents, but also from our own, leadership. So, and I'm not asking you to go into that, but none of us are strangers. I ran for Congress in California's 49th district, and Brandon here worked in the political consulting for many years. We've seen behind the curtain. We understand that there are forces who push and pull in these political parties, and there's so many stakeholders people don't even understand. It's like obviously you have your base, and that's very important, probably the most important. You have your constituents, you have donors, because none of this works without fundraising. So you have the donor class, you have the lobbying class in Sacramento, which also is a big donor class. Then you have leadership, then you have the respective parties, you have the media. There's so many facets to this, and it's very hard to battle, if you will, in any one area because they use each other to exert control and power. Something it's very nefarious.
Something that the left is very good at is keeping their voters engaged. This reminds me of when I was working on an election integrity, and we would tell people, we'd be right after an election. There's not an election for, another 18 months or maybe even 2 years. And we'd say, hey, now's the time to fix the voter rolls, because we can't do it within 60 days of an election. Well, nobody cares 2 years out about election integrity. No. They come to you on day 59 and say, okay, we're ready to fix the voter rolls. And it's like, yeah, remember when we told you 18 months ago that we can't do that? So somehow the left is able to keep their voter base engaged throughout the entire cycle. And that's something that I don't think that, working in Republican politics for the better part of the last decade, I don't think that Republicans have grasped how to keep the attention span of their voters for very long at all. And I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I'll give you a great example, Brandon, on that issue. The very first bill I introduced on the day I was sworn in, December 5th, 2022, the very first bill I introduced, AB 13, was to fix the voting system.
Yep.
It was to put California back to the system in which you vote in person on election day. It would have banned ballot harvesting, and it would have required you to request an absentee ballot. So no more mass mail ballots. I put this out. I did press releases. Very little interest in the bill.
Nobody cares.
Very little. Nobody cared. The party, they don't really want to talk about it. We got to move on from, voter integrity issues, whatever. All the businesses, the donor class that cared about the voting, they didn't care. The media didn't care. And so, yeah, it had a hearing. I got a hearing on the bill. I struggled to get witnesses and people in support of it, and it just died in darkness.
And they're going to come to you 30 days before the election next time around. They're going to say, Bill, what can we do about election integrity? And you're going to have to look at them and say, remember when I tried to get a bill passed 2 years ago?
No support.
It's just that specifically election integrity is something that's really true for, as you said in the example that I gave too. And it's absolutely infuriating because the donors, everybody from the donors to the party, to the volunteers, they all want to do something about it when it's too late. And it happens. I've seen it. Like I said, I've been working in politics for the better part of the last decade. I've seen it happen almost every cycle that election integrity has been an issue, which has been most cycles recently.
And Brandon, that was a good bill, and it was a compromise bill because we were going to go back to voting in person, and in exchange and as a compromise, I would have made Election Day a holiday.
Yeah.
So people would have been off work and said, let's just make it a holiday. Everyone's off work and you go vote in person. There's no excuse for why you can't make it out. And it was a great bill, and it got like little to no attention.
Yeah, I mean, not to dig in too much to election integrity because we're running out of time, but one of the biggest issues when it comes to like ballot harvesting is it's not people, it's the opportunity of the integrity of the voter rolls. How do I say this? So when you don't manage the voter rolls, that's where opportunity arises for there to be games played. I don't think that when I was digging into it and looking at the data, like the raw data from the registration, the voter rolls, it's not dead people voting or things like that. It's simply a mismanagement of the voter rolls. You have a 900
intentional, dismanagement.
Yeah, you have a 900 square foot house, and there's 20 people registered to vote there. Well, okay, that math doesn't add up. So why aren't we doing anything about that? And when you go to present it to the registrar, they're just like, yeah, it's like the DMV. It's like, well, what can we do? So it's a lot less conspiracy and much more dismanagement.
There's a federal law that requires them to maintain the voter rolls.
Yeah.
How many lawsuits have been filed to enforce that law? I think maybe one against LA County.
They don't care about the law.
The left engages in lawfare. They use the law as a weapon, and they file strategic lawsuits where it matters, how it matters. We just don't do the same, and we need to.
Yeah, I mean, look at the legal onslaught levied at former President Donald Trump. All the while, you have Hunter Biden and Joe Biden receiving $10 million a year from the Communist Party in China. I mean, and that's like verifiable evidence. You and I know I would take that to court if I had a download, right? If I dumped a cell phone and I had text messages, verified messages from known Chinese Communist Party members saying, talking about a payoff, a pay-to-play scheme, I would take that to court. That's called evidence. They don't care about the law. They don't care about the voter rolls. They don't care about, as long as they're winning, it's all good. And this is why we have to fight back on a no compromise agenda, I think, because they've declared war politically. They're using lawfare, like you said. They're using the power of legislation. They are legislating morality. They're trying to change the definition of what America is. And there's a few core things that are the pylons that sustain the foundations of this country. And all of them are moral foundations. As you pointed out, the founders knew that. They knew, as Benjamin Franklin, when he was ambassador to France, in the late 1700s. He would often give speeches, and one French politician, I quoted him in my book, said that Franklin would often comment that wherever the basic principles of Christianity were introduced, it would change the world for the better. The founders believed that, and those basic principles included things that the left is now wholeheartedly attacking that we dismiss as political. It's an error. Before we go, I want to bring up one more thing, Bill. This is important. I think you can speak to this probably more than some. This is Jen Psaki on her comments. You probably heard this. You did hear this because you told me about this. Jen Psaki commenting that the GOP is, quote, manipulating Muslims against the trans community. In her segment, let's see, who covered this? Actually, Megyn Kelly covered it on her segment. But Psaki now, if for those listening don't know, it's the former White House press secretary, has gone on to work at the propaganda machine that is the MSNBC. And she went off and on about how the GOP is recruiting Muslims to, oppose transgender people. She said it's a right-wing strategy to divide minority groups. All the while, by the way, hundreds of primarily Muslim and Ethiopian Orthodox parents rallied outside a Montgomery County Board of Education in Maryland last week, demanding that administrators allow students to opt out of lessons that use material with LGBTQ characters. Didn't we see this in California as well?
Yeah, I think it was Glendale.
Glendale, that's right. You had
Armenian
Catholics,
parents.
Armenians, Muslims, all standing together to oppose, and the left is just freaking out. Now, the reason I say you could speak to this is because Corey Jackson, another California assemblyman, recently called you a white supremacist, right? Remind me again of why. What is it that makes you a white supremacist?
He's trying to introduce a California constitutional amendment, ACA 5, to get rid of Prop 209, which prohibits affirmative action in the state of California. So he wants the government to be racist, and I oppose that, and he called me the white supremacist.
Are you a white supremacist?
No, I'm not a white supremacist.
Because I don't want you on my show.
I find it, well, first of all, I'm Lebanese, I'm not even white. And I find it shocking that if you oppose racism, if you oppose the government segregating us based on race and treating us differently, you are the white supremacist. And this is how backwards and messed up their logic is. But again, logic and facts don't matter. It's about a narrative. And they're helping people. They want to help the minorities. They want to help Black people, and they're saying these laws are preventing us from helping them, from giving them money or reparations or whatever benefits, and therefore you're standing in the way, you're a white supremacist. It's to neutralize you, to end the conversation and discredit you. That's what they do.
How is it that Americans don't see this? I'm continually shocked by the left's continual narrative of they do it to everyone. They do it to every identity group that they seem to be losing grasp on. Then they turn around and say, well, you're too stupid to realize you're being manipulated, right? You're too stupid to do this on your own. They do this with the Black community as well, right? Anytime there's any issue that they're trying to racialize, they're like, oh, well, Black people need Democrats. You're too dumb to get a driver's license. You're too dumb to, get an ID to vote. It's so offensive and racist what they're saying that if you're not dependent on them, you're an idiot, right? They're doing it now with Asians as well in the wake of the recent decision to get rid of affirmative action. Now they're saying that Asians are complicit. I read an article this morning, complicit in the white supremacist agenda of the United States. I mean, tell me,
it works because they've convinced Black people and Muslims that Republicans hate them.
Yeah.
They've convinced them that. So they do not see us as partners or allies or there to help them. They've convinced us we hate them. And therefore, when their policies actually hurt them, right? The Democrat policies hurt these groups, these minority groups. But because they've convinced them that they're on their side, quote unquote, they give them the benefit of the doubt. Well, I think what's happening now, and it's slowly, people are awakening. And I think you see that with Muslims now. Muslims are like, hold on, you're teaching my kids what? No, not going to accept that. We're not going to go along with that. and Muslims they have deep beliefs in their faith, and they're going to go exercise those in the public square. And I think that's what you're seeing now. And really, what Jen Psaki is doing is so condescending and so arrogant. And I hope that it comes across that way to Muslims, because if you don't think the way she wants you to think, then she doesn't believe you have the capacity to think on your own.
Right.
She thinks you're dumb, you're lower class, and you have to accept her way as the right way, or you're somehow being manipulated or brainwashed by Republicans. First of all, we've had a very long conversation. Republicans aren't very good at brainwashing anybody. Mm-hmm. So the idea that Republicans have brainwashed Muslims to do their bidding is just laughable on its face.
Well, because that's the kind of junk that they do, right? They engage in mass psyops and brainwashing, and it's in every socialist playbook throughout history. The psychological impact on culture is very important to them, right? Another way of saying that is the culture war. And as openly often admitted, the GOP does not engage in the culture war, right? Who was it, Brandon, the other day? Paul Ryan, who dismissed the culture war as a waste of time. I don't want to focus. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. The culture war is exactly the method by which the left is winning the war, the political war in this country. That's all they do. It's all culture war issues. What they do is they take a moral or cultural issue and they make it political. As soon as they make it political, they say, oh, you can't talk about it anymore, right? It's like, should we be racist in the government and, continue to use affirmative action? Oh, well, you can't talk about that because if you oppose us, you're racist. Anyways. Well, listen, we're out of time. I really appreciate you coming on, Bill. I got a last few questions for you. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Lightning round.
Yep. Here we go. One, what's your favorite food?
Oh, French fries.
What? That's not even a real answer.
That's like a side.
Did you say French fries?
I love French fries. That's
a side. Okay.
What about maybe loaded French fries with like carne asada fries?
Can we get some pulled pork on there?
Yeah.
Cheese fries.
Cheese fries. Okay. Okay. Where's the best place to get? I don't know. Now I don't trust you. Where's the best place to get? I'm still thinking food. Obviously, I'm hungry. Best place for Middle Eastern food that you know of,
if
restaurant.
you really want some good Lebanese food, there's a place called Open Sesame in Long Beach on 2nd Street. It's really good.
Okay. All right. Specific. Open Sesame. Yep. I someone just asked me that recently. I like Carousel in Glendale. Have you been there?
Oh yeah, no, I have. It's great.
Carousel's really good.
It's really good.
Okay. I was on another podcast last week, and he did a lightning round with me, and he asked me this question. I was not prepared for it, so I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna ask you, what if you could drive any car, if you had your choice, right? Don't worry about the gas and pretend Tyrant Newsom doesn't exist. What would you drive?
I just saw this Arnold documentary, and he had this 6-wheeler military vehicle. I would love to drive one of those things.
A Hummer?
He had a military vehicle. It was like a 6-wheeler, and he was driving through the snow in Lake Tahoe.
That's what you would drive?
I would want to drive. Are you talking about every day, or
I don't know if the Democrats in Sacramento would appreciate you rolling up there in a 6-wheeled military vehicle.
Could you imagine just coming on the steps of the Capitol? They would have.
I love it.
You would be so canceled.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen. Keep fighting the fight, please. The war has just begun. Thanks everybody for listening, and State Assemblyman Bill Essayli, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts and going back and forth with us a little bit. Any parting words, and we're closing it up.
No, just thank you guys, and I really hope everyone listens. Thinks about these things and maybe talks to a few friends or family members and gets them engaged. Awesome, outstanding. Well, thanks again for having us on, Brandon. Cue the music. And as always, follow us on social media platforms. Check out